I'll start from the beginning and just explain a little bit about what really intrigued me about a recent LinkedIn post I've seen of you, which was obviously you reached out to your father about the kind of background that you have, but more importantly, that you felt the need to actually reach out to your dad. So I was not only intrigued, but also I think it's a really important story to tell, because I think as a psychologist, when we talk a lot with people about stuff that happened in their childhood and they want to kind of resolve or come to a point of, resolution, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is usually going back to the person that obviously has been absent from their lives for quite a number of time, or whatever reason that relationship sort of severed, and going back to that and having some closure is probably a huge step for a number of people to understand and take the steps as to why it's beneficial for them to do it. When I saw that you did, and we had a brief discussion previously, I was really curious and intrigued to just find out more. So do you want to give a little bit of a summary about where you're up to and what's kind of happened? Because I know you've spoken briefly in some of your posts, but just for the sake of this interview.
Sure. So basically, had a mum. Mum with BiPolar Disorder 1. Really great mum, and had a younger sister as well. And we did have a dad for a while. But we were living in between, I think, Melbourne. Then, he had issues. I think he was in jail for a little bit for a financial sort of thing. It wasn't a bad crime. So he was at a very low level prison, but he couldn't get that job over in Melbourne. So he had to move to Perth. And the problem with that is that my mum was one of 11 and she had all her brothers and sisters in Warrnambool. And when they went to Perth, she had no support, no nothing. So he was over there and he had to get a job there. And he got a job there, and then within a year or two, the company ended up shut down. He's an electronics communications engineer, so he couldn't really get a job in what he wanted to do in Perth. So he then took up a job with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, working for the King, putting up the GSM network, so all the mobile networks in Saudi Arabia back in the day. Yeah, over there for that project, and it was really, really good money. We're talking like six figures back in 1992 or 93. Really good money. And but the downside of that was he was only allowed to come back 2 weeks a year because it's Saudi Arabia. It's not easy to get a visa out and all that sort of stuff. So that he only got 2 weeks of holidays a year. So he went off, and the problem with that was that mum was then left to her own sort of parenting. So she's a single parent, trying to look after 2 kids plus manage her condition. She was trying to work on and off, and he was good with providing a lot of money. But one of the bad things you could do for my mum was give her money, because she just spend it frivolously and all these silly things. So whilst he was working over in Saudi Arabia, she was pretty much just left to her own devices with no one checking on her behavior. There was no family, no nothing. So she was pretty much just allowed to run free reign, and which was good for a while because she was pretty stable back then. But then when she got unwell, she got really, really unwell. So I remember there was a time, I think it was the first time she would have got unwell a few times before, I remember it. But the one time, went to school one day, she's dropped us off, and then next minute the police are grabbing us out of the classroom to go to the principal's office and saying, your mum's in hospital. We've got, you're going to have to go to this place or whatever it is. So back in the divvy van, and you go to the local human services office at this shopping centre in Perth called Mirrabooka, which is not a nice place. And you're in a room and there's some old guy there, and you're basically being told, they're just trying to find you accommodation because your mum's not well. So then you sort of instantly think, well, where's dad? Where's he, and all that sort of stuff. And he's overseas. And then, he
How old were you, John?
I think that was like 6 or 7. That was the first one I remember. But it happened before that. It happened a few times before that, but I can't really remember that too much. First one I can remember. So 6 or 7. And then he wouldn't come back because he had his good job and he was earning good money. Yeah. He had his responsibilities. But he wouldn't come back. So then he just let us go into foster care. So we're in foster care and had no idea of what was really going on. So we're in there, and then if you go to school one day, everything's normal and hunky-dory. Then at the end of the school day, you're in some strange lady's house, in a suburban house you don't know. So,
and Joel, if you don't mind me asking a few questions, you never went from Perth back to Melbourne, considering that your father now has gone to Saudi Arabia? Because your mum's family is all in Melbourne, is that right?
They're all in Warrnambool, which is like 240 k's west of Melbourne. Yeah. But I don't think they knew. This is the thing. I don't think they knew. Yeah, I don't think they knew at all. So my mum was very close with her mum and some of her brothers and sisters, and I don't think they knew anything. So you didn't even bother, or no one even bothered to call them. So that's what I've been told. Yeah. So no one from Human Services or whoever it was, or even him, bothered to call her mum or her family. So they didn't know, is what I've been told. So
and you have a younger sister. So this happened when you're 6 or 7. So your sister would have been what?
She's 14 months younger than me. So she should have been 6 or 5. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, then we were taken to this lady's house, and then that was it. So that was it. No real context and anything at all. And it was sort of very confusing because, you think, well, where is he? Why don't he just get on a plane to come back? But reality is he couldn't because where he was. And also, there's a mortgage and stuff like that. And he wanted to keep the house, so he had to stay over there, which is what I realize now. But at the time, it was very hard to know. And the annoying thing as well was that no one told her mum or her family, because they would have been able to help. There was 11 brothers and sisters. 10 brothers and sisters, and her mum and her dad at the time. So they had no knowledge of it.
Did they ever reach out, like your mother's family, to see how you're doing in Perth? Because what was the time frame between when that first happened, that episode where you stayed at someone's house, and then until you next saw either your dad or your mother's family?
Well, we didn't move back to, I think we went to Warrnambool like once or twice. This was where mum was well, but they had no idea what was going on. So they had no idea she'd been in the hospital and all that sort of stuff. And I think we went over when we were like 10 or something, and then, but they didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And then we ended up doing a permanent move then when we were 13, because her mum said she needs help. This, she can't keep going on like this. And, we can't keep having the kids go to these, situations if something happens. So he ended up paying for my mum's brother, or basically for us to move over. So, my mum and dad separated I think it was like 13, or just when I turned 13, they separated. But they were separated for like 8 years, essentially, because he was over in Saudi Arabia, and he'd come back 2 weeks of a year. And when he come back, because, she hasn't seen him for 50 weeks or whatever, they'd just be fighting, and there'd be a lot of dramas and all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of good in a way that he was not there. But it was very hard to take in, because, you think this person's supposed to be your protector or your father, and he just chooses to stay away, knowing what's happening at home.
And so when you moved back to 13, back to Victoria, you're saying that your grandparents started to be aware that there was more issues happening for your mother than just the relationship. There's also other things happening for her? Yeah,
well, I think what happened was her father ended up passing away in a very tragic event. Actually, he had all this arthritis and stuff, and he was a smoker, and he was left on the porch with a big blanket on him, and he dropped a smoke on him and went up in flames. It was like national news. That was the impetus for mum to get really, really unwell. So she went back to see him, and then she got unwell, and I think it was decided by the family then, hey, we can't keep having the kids and stuff with what's going on with here. And then, basically, my grandmother sent one of my mum's brothers across. Dennis, who's a really good fella, and he basically chucked out all of our belongings, really, and put everything in a Toyota Camry and drove over there. I don't think there was much else besides that. There might have been like one container or something that came over, but basically we moved from Perth to Warrnambool in like 3 days. We drove across the Nullarbor and all that sort of stuff. So it was pretty just get them back over, and that was it. So
and that meant that you were right at high school age. So
I just started high school. I was in high school. So I was in high school. Then the next day, not in high school, and you're driving across to a new town. So that's what pretty much happened.
And did you, after, when you're 13, you moved back to Victoria, I'm assuming obviously you're much more connected with your mother's family?
I wasn't really at the start, because I didn't really know him too well. I met him once. I met him once when we came over for I can't remember what the event was, but we came over for Christmas one year, and and they always did like a big family photo and stuff, but not really. Like, we had maybe one or two cousins come over to stay with us once in Perth, but that was it. I didn't really have much knowledge of them all at all.
Okay.
So it's probably the second time I met most of them when I was over there.
And since moving there, and obviously for 13, and I don't know how long you stayed there, did that relationship become stronger with your mother's family? Or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my mum, they're really good people. All of them really good people. So I had 3 first cousins in my year level at school, which is cool. So we're very close. So there's like 50 first cousins, and most of them were living at Warrnambool at the time. We're very close, because when mum would get sick, we would go over. I would live with all of them. So that was, I'd live with auntie and uncle, or live with another auntie and uncle and stuff like that, or live with my grandmother. So when mum got unwell, that was the main reason why they brought us over, is that when she went unwell, they didn't want us, at least they could look after us. Whereas before, it was just random families and friends and foster families and stuff like that. So that was the reason for coming over, really.
And you stay out, is it Warrnambool?
Yes, Warrnambool, yeah.
And until how old?
I was there around 23, 24. Yeah, it was hard to leave. So my younger sister left as soon as she could. She just left because she didn't like my mum or whatever. So she got out of there. But for me, I felt really guilty in leaving. So it was hard for me to leave. I wanted to leave earlier, but I just had no real direction. So I eventually ended up leaving, but it was very hard.
And between 13 and 23, because obviously that was the time you were at that area in Victoria, did you keep in touch with your dad?
Not really, no. I think maybe there was one time he tried to email me or something, or my mum was still really in love with him. So she'd always try and call him and stuff, and he wasn't giving her much back. And he might call once or twice, and mum would talk to him, and I wouldn't talk to him. I didn't want anything to do with him. So nothing really at all.
So knowing that kind of background, and recently you reached out to him, what prompted you to do that? Because you reached out through him this time, is that right?
Yeah, I started making contact with him when my mum got really sick, so she got terminal. I messaged him about it, and I just said to him, "Look, she's blah blah blah." It was almost like a a peace thing, almost in a way, just saying, I was sort of testing him away. I wanted him to actually come over. That's what I was thinking.
Yep.
You're the lady who you left with us, and who you still say you care about, and the kids. You should make the effort to come over. She's terminal now. She might have 6 months, 5 months, whatever. Make the effort and come over. But he didn't do it. And I was really frustrated. I said, I'll pay for you to come over if you want. But he didn't take that offer up. Yeah. So he didn't do it, but which was very, very disappointing. But that was the impetus. When mum got terminal, I started sort of just reaching out to him a bit. And then after mum passed away, then I started, well, I've only got one parent now, so I need to do something about it. And there's a lot of answers that I don't have. So the only way I'm going to get answers to those questions is to actually ask them. And I'm not going to get them if I'm being negative and aggressive to someone. So I've got to make sure I am cool, calm, and collected, and just try and look at the person for who they are, and try and start understanding. Because if I just kept on for the anger and resentment and the hate I had for him, I would not have any of the answers I have, and I'd be a far more different person to what I am at the moment, because I find myself a lot more calmer and stuff as well. I've got a lot more answers, got a lot more complete understanding. Whereas before I had no understanding of his side of the family or reasons why he did what he did. So I had all this resentment and anger for 33 years, 34 years built up towards this one person, and it eats away. Yeah. So it was more as well a selfish thing to get rid of that.
Well, my question then is, how did you manage that? Because that's probably what I find a lot with people, is that's the hardest stumbling block. Would you have all this buildup of emotion for so many years and so much anger and resentment, as you mentioned, for people to actually breach that? It's more painful than it is to actually, see what the outcome of that connection with the person that you missed for so long. What brought you to have I'm using terms that I'm familiar with, but the courage, I guess it's a courage, because I'm assuming a lot of people would be saying you don't need to worry about it. It's nothing that you should be investing time and energy on. So how did you manage those emotions? That's the first question. The second thing is, at what point did you feel as if, okay, now I understand, or I started to get some resolution about all these emotions that I'm holding in?
Yeah, well, the way I managed him initially was I just wrote to him. I couldn't speak to him because I found if I speak to him initially, I'd just go real aggressive and different and wasn't very nice to him. So I found out once I started writing to him, got some questions to answer. He gave me some really detailed replies, to be fair. So I'd ask a question to give me like a real wrong reply. So I asked him a few things. I thought they were genuine. And then I started, maybe texting, and I started calling him slowly and stuff like that. And the thing with this was when I started reaching out to him, I had all these expectations about, he's going to be bringing me every week and being proactive and stuff like that, which he didn't do, which I wanted him to do, which he didn't do. So I literally had to tell him. I said to him, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And he did it. Yeah. So that's what started happening. So I had to start realizing I was the more mature person in this situation, even though he's 77. I had to realize that emotionally and maturity wise in regards to this, he's not that mature at all. And he doesn't have the emotional intelligence at all, really, to be able to deal with this situation. So then I thought, well, I've got to take the lead in this sort of thing. And if I want to have a good outcome with this, I've got to take the lead and sort of just not react to it. It was hard to not react to a lot of things, when you hear a few excuses and different things like that, because I'm not a father or anything, but I sort of think, if I was a father, I would not be doing what he did. I just don't see how it's justified. But having chats with him and different things like that, I understand his position. I don't judge the position. And then also I have no benefit from anger. Like, what is anger? What does hate do to you as a person? It always gnaws away you in the back of the head. And then when my mum passed away, it was a very tough emotional time. But for whatever that reason was, I just sort of decided, look, I forgive him. That's it, done. I don't care whatever else happened. I literally just put a line in the sand in my head mentally and said, I just forgive him. I'm not going to hold this against him anymore. And let's just move on. Because, time goes like this and you've got all this stuff here and it's going to keep going like that and you're still stuck here. So I just wanted to get rid of that thing that just kept pulling at me back in a way. And look, it might sound, and look, everyone in their life has got someone where this is maybe happening to them, so whether it's a friend or a family member or whatever. And it just takes a bit of what, it just takes someone being proactive, from just one person being proactive, one person just decide to put the line in the sand and reach out. And most of the time, from what I know, it's always been a positive experience and people always regret not doing it sooner. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, Joel. And I appreciate you being very frank and honest. And I'm going to ask a few questions. Let me know if it's too personal.
No, go for it.
I'd be keen to know a little bit about what sort of questions you did ask your father after so many years of absence and, the kind of build up of resentment, what were some of the questions that you really wanted to ask him?
Well, that's a bit of a history. So I've got a really deep, I know my mum's history really well in regards to her family and stuff. And her father had bipolar and she's got a few sisters bipolar. So I know that sort of side of it. I want to know it more for myself as well. When I start having a family and stuff, I need to know these things. And with him, it was more like, where were you actually born? Because you have the birth certificate with Zagreb, Croatia, and another birth certificate Vienna, Austria. So where were you actually born? What was your history? What was your job? And he went right through it, and it was very, very interesting. So, I didn't even know I had an auntie in Germany. I've still got an auntie in Germany who's 85 in Nuremberg, and he's got a daughter that I did knew about, but I've got a half sister who lives in Melbourne. So she lives in Sorrento. Yeah. So finding out about family history, things like that, asking about history about, why did you go to jail? Give you an honest answer, all this sort of thing. And then it was basically the nitty-gritty stuff, like, why did you leave us? Why didn't you just leave your job and come back? I would have worked at McDonald's and done whatever to come and be with my kids. Why did you do that? Why did you not explain things properly?
Yeah.
All those sorts of things. So those questions that I had a bit burning for me, I gave to him. And I had to do it in writing. And then if I gave it in writing, it gave him more time. Because if I tried to ask him that on the phone, his English is like his fourth language or third language. So he wouldn't be able to explain it properly. But when I gave him time to write it down, I got a lot of good stuff. He sent me a lot of proof as well of different newspaper clippings from his company and all these different things. So just to get a bit of a history about him, because I had no idea. I didn't know what was truthful or what was not. And then also just the reasons why he did what he did. As I said, I found it hard to reconcile with. But when you hear, when I got it in paper from his side with everything that happened, I can sort of understand it, because that moment when he didn't decide to come back or whatever, there's a whole life he's had before that coming up to that, which is made in that way. So once I understood those facts and what happened to him, and he was born in 1945 at the end of World War II in Zagreb, so that was part of all that area then at the time, German community. So there was a lot of things going on back then, especially growing up. So hearing some of his stories and stuff, I sort of thought, well, no wonder you're a bit emotionally stunted and stuff because of what's happened. So it sort of gave me more empathy once I knew his history and more understanding of what he did. And
the process of when you got back to got in touch with him and started sending emails, how long was that? I'm assuming there's been quite a lot of
backwards and forwards. It was a long time between emails. It was like a couple of years. So I would read it, then I wouldn't reply. Then maybe 6 months later, I'd go back. So it was a long time. It wasn't every week or something like that. So
did the answers that given you, obviously some of the answers allowed you to understand a little bit more about him as a person, but the question about when you probably needed your dad more than any other times, when your mother was unwell in Perth, did he give you some answers that gave some context to why he might not have been there?
It was more financial stuff. So, obviously he just bought a house and there was a car payment and stuff and had to provide money for us kids and stuff. But, that was his excuse, to him. I didn't really care about that sort of stuff. You could have come back and done whatever job, to be honest. I just don't think he wanted to go and stoop to something he didn't maybe thought he was overqualified to do. I still disagree with him on that. And look, he's told me recently anyway that he regretted going to Saudi Arabia. So I'll sort of take that as half an apology. It's sort of, getting those things out from him was good in a way because it's lessons that I can learn and what not to do. So.
And you did talk that you have your sister, obviously. Was she involved in any of this in terms of her process or understanding or knowing that you're engaging or connecting with him?
Yeah, we did it separately. So we didn't, she had a way better relationship with him than me. So it's sort of gone opposite now. So, so it's a bit of a thing. He doesn't have a good relationship with either his other daughter and non-existent really. So at the moment with those two. Yeah, with me he does, with the other two he doesn't.
But you're saying that he used to have a better relationship with your sister than he does. Okay.
Yes.
So she kept in touch with him at all?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, so she did. Yeah, she was always a lot more closer to him than what I was. So I was always the mum's favorite. She was also always my dad's favorite. So that was why. But it's sort of flipped at the moment. So it's a bit interesting at the moment. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to talk to your sister a little bit about this, what you found out about your dad and understanding a little bit about your family history? A
little bit. She told me a little bit of things, but it's not something I really went out of my way to talk to her about. When my mum got really sick, we had two different approaches with mum. So we're sort of not on good terms at the moment with that. So it'll be something where I probably have to come to the table again and broach the piece. But I did ask her certain things, but it was hard to believe with that as well. So it was hard to believe what was true or not. So once I got things in writing and stuff and started speaking to him, I did believe him a bit more. But yeah, she told me a few things over the years, but it wasn't something that I was truly believing.
What your sister was telling you found it hard to believe?
No, telling me stuff about him that I found hard to believe. So it was, I think, various different things.
Now, in terms of how this experience has helped you, can you give us a little bit of insight as to how you're feeling now? Because, like I said to you before, one of the things that people most find difficult is breaching that ability to cross over all these emotions to get some resolution and feeling at peace with yourself. Because that's a really hard, especially when some certain things have been built up for so many years. And so I'd be keen to find out a little bit about where you are now. How has this kind of pivoted your life in a different direction than if you've never gone down this path?
Yeah, well, I've definitely lost a lot of I don't have I don't have any resentment towards him. I don't have those flashbacks in my head about certain things anymore, really, about it. In regards to, he's 77. So if he passed away, let's say if he passed away this week, I would not have any answer that I wouldn't know. So I'd have all the answers that I need to know. And I would also not regret not making contact. So I've made contact. I've invited him into my home. He's come over and stayed with me for 10 days. So all these different things, I would have no regrets. I would have no regrets if something happened. And I also feel better. I've got more of an understanding of myself and all my history of that side. Yeah, I just feel mentally a lot better. It's like a big weight off my head. When I did decide to reach out and just forgive me, it's just a big wash of relief. And it's just felt more freer in my mind. So it's been really good for me. It's been really cathartic. It's been really therapeutic, actually. When you just decide to forgive someone, and no matter what they do or say to you or what they've done can have any affect you emotionally, there's a really big power in that. When you be able to do that as such a big step with someone who's done so much or hasn't been there for you or for whatever, you can find that you apply that in other areas of your life as well. So being able to do this, it really focuses you on trying to be more proactive in other areas or trying to fix other relationships that you don't have. I think it makes you just a better person overall. Makes you made me far more calmer and less, I don't know what it is psychologically, but less reactive, I'm definitely less emotional now in regards to different things.
Do you still keep in touch with him at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I speak to him probably every week. So he's always sent him. Yeah.
So is it almost like building the relationship again with him?
Yeah, exactly right. I understand for what it is. Like he still tries to be father sometimes and advise me on certain things and that, which is very hard. That's what parents are going to do, but it's sort of very hard to take any advice from him. But it's look, we talk via WhatsApp and stuff, and he sends me emails with different things, and we talk once every week or once every 2 weeks. So he'll probably come back. In over the end of the year. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I talk to him regularly at the moment. Yeah. And
in terms then of the discussion about your mum, did you ever speak to him about your mum, about her passing away, and what are some of the relationship dynamics between him and her?
Yeah, so I didn't really get too much in the relationship, but he would just say things, very beautiful, very, very good mother. He was very positive about it, never said anything negative about her at all. The one thing he kept saying was, I should have stopped those doctors from giving her ECT. I was telling him not to do it, telling him not to do it. And, well, my thing was all like, why didn't you stop it? And so, but it was more, nothing negative really. It was just all positive and in regrets about how he wasn't more involved with her treatment and her care was really the two things.
Your wider family in Victoria, have they aware and understand a little bit more about your kind of situation now in terms of what you've been through with your mum and obviously with your dad now reconnecting?
Yeah, well, they were always involved with my mum, so they were really good people, and they were heavily involved. And when mum was in palliative care for 4 weeks, they obviously all come to see her and all that sort of stuff multiple times, so they're completely aware of that. Yeah, I actually brought my dad to Christmas this year. So he went we have like a couple of family functions and he went there. He didn't enjoy it too much because I think he felt real awkward because he felt really like, all these people hate me. So why would I go there? But I thought they're really good people. So they didn't mind. No, look, I think they think it's a good thing. They think it's a mature thing that I've done. It's something that I think hopefully, there's a few situations that they can maybe learn from. But no, they're all happy for me. There's no like, oh, why did you reconnect with him or anything? There's nothing like that. So they're all really good, positive people.
Joel, I guess the only thing I'd say is what I was hoping to achieve out of today and talking to you is just the kind of advice, because in my experience, that is one of the hardest things that I find when I'm talking with people to try and get them understanding of, when the childhood doesn't go according to where they think childhood should go. And you always look at your childhood through the eyes of a child anyway. And then it's not until you get an adult that you kind of reflect saying that, things are very different. And a lot of the difficulties with people getting closure, like you're saying that there's all this stuff happening in the background and time just keeps moving on. And what you want to do is people to move away from just living in that space that's happened and resentment and stuff. And I'd be keen to ask you a little bit about what advice you would give, because, there's not just people talking with mental illness, there's people with substance substance abuse, there's people with family breakdown or death of a family or member. There's lots of different emotions that sometimes people struggle to get over. Not over is not the right word, but to make sense of that, to be able to then learn and have a direction in the future that's different from holding them back in the past. So are there things that you think that would be really important as advice or suggestions that would help others?
Yeah, I'd say listen to an audio book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This guy had a really, really hard childhood and, a lot more harder than mine, physically and stuff. And you just listen to what he went through and then how he used it as his fuel and stuff. But I'd say be proactive if you want to change your life. If your life's not where you want it to be for whatever reason, these childhood traumas or these things can be holding you back and a lot, and it does affect your personality, right? So the way you are now with people is a reflection of what's happened in all this stuff here. So if you don't like who you are or you want to improve who you are, you need to seriously look at the root cause and be proactive about it and try and change it. Yeah, and the key word as well is get rid of your ego about it. So everyone's got an ego where someone aggrieves them, they think I'm not in the wrong. I'm not the one who should have to come on and apologize or make the first step. They need to come to me. If you have that attitude, you're never going to get anywhere. You've got to be proactive in taking control of every situation. So if that's mentally, physically, whatever it is, no one's going to come and help you. Like, unfortunately, we think that with the world, or if you go through a hard thing, the universe is going to all of a sudden, you're going to win lotto the next day and it's going to sort you out. It doesn't happen like that. So you've got to be proactive if you really want to change who you are, and you've got to understand that the benefits and the rewards are there for doing the hard things, because it's not easy doing it. It's very, very hard. It's very, very challenging, but that's where you get the growth. You don't get growth from being comfortable and from not taking any and from not doing hard things. You only get growth when you do hard things. And this childhood stuff or this emotional stuff or these relationship stuff is the hard stuff. And you've got to go head on into it. And it will be very hard, but it'll be very, very rewarding. And if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, then at least you won't have any regret. If it goes the way you want it to go, then fantastic. But if it doesn't, you're not going to have any regret either, and you're going to feel a lot better. There's no negative to tackling it. The only negative is you might feel, I think, a bit emotional at the time or whatever it is, but that's natural and that's normal. But I don't think there's any negative in trying to be better and to try and address those things that might be holding you back, because we don't realize, Bill, like how much these incidents and these things, how they reflect on you as now. Like you might act a certain way you do now because of something that happened 20 years ago. Wouldn't you want to go, and if you don't like that part about yourself, why wouldn't you want to go and treat it or try and move on from it? So that's what I think people do. And a lot of people won't do it because it's just hard. It's not easy to do. And there's an ego involved as well. And there might be this victimhood or this, which I used to have a lot of victimhood mentality with these sorts of things. But you've got to have a bit of perspective and realize, if we're talking about Australia, like we live in a really, really good place. Like I'm pretty happy and lucky where I am. A lot of people would trade their position with me. So I try and look at things a bit more holistically as well. So it's not just woe is me or this is that. Like there's a far more, it's very cliche, but there's a lot far more worse off people than me and what I've gone through. This is just my situation, but there's no real excuse for anyone not trying to make the effort and do it. There's no downside to it really long term, in my opinion. These things, you don't realize how much they do hold you back and they do affect your personality. And if you can fix it, why not? So that'd be what I would say to people, would just be proactive and get the ego out of it. And you've just got to make the first step. And no matter what that first step is, you'll feel better when you do it. Really
good insight, Joel, and I appreciate you being very open and honest with us. I guess we spoke about obviously your upbringing or the situation that happened with your family. We spoke a little bit about the family connections and relationship, and now obviously you're reconnected with your father. You know quite well that I'm also a clinician, and I'd be keen to know what advice would you give to the professions that assist people with mental health? What are some of the things from your perspective of how you grew up that you think, and the cliche question is, if you had a magic wand, how would you change a system? It's a big question, but are there insights that you think you could provide that would help the professions and the system, the mental health care system, that may alleviate some people who might be going through something similar in the future?
In regards to my mum or the care, or?
Yeah, I think there's three areas here, because obviously you got your mum as an individual in terms of her illness. That's one part of it. The second one then is how it impacts on the domino effect around the family. And the third one is literally about the process that you've gone through. For example, when you pulled out of school, and there must be some better ways of doing some of those things. So I'm asking a very big questions, and there are three parts to it, but we'll start, if it's okay with you, if we'll start with those first three things. So the first one being your mum, what advice would you give? And I know you touched upon about the ECG and a few times before, but what do you think are some of the things that the profession needs to take on board as something that we should be doing, differently or better?
Yeah, well, I don't think they realise the impact of their treatment on the family. So, my when my mum had to have various, ECT and all the medication, and I was sort of experimenting a lot with it, which you have to do understand that, but we had to deal with the effects of it. So I had to deal with the drooling face, or if I was brought in for a visit, I'd be taken into a room with her, and then maybe the day before she's had ECT and she's saying things about like the devil and this sort of thing, right? I'm in a room with her. So they prioritized her recovery, which is fine, but over my and my younger sisters, what's that going to do to us emotionally? So, you've almost forced a trauma on us, multiple traumas on us multiple times for my mum's benefit over ours, because she was annoying the staff because she wants to see her kids flat out. She wouldn't stop about it. So they just said, get the kids in and whatever. So, but who does that benefit more? Benefits her a lot more. And it's really negative to us. So that happened multiple times. So I'd be very careful about letting kids go into psychiatric wards.
Yes.
If you are going to take them into psychiatric wards, really make sure that they're prepared for it in regards to maybe what they're going to see, and actually explain the people in there. Because the problem with my mum, she's really social, so she'd be whipping us around, introducing us to all these patients in there, like these catatonic people or whatever. And it was very embarrassing. I didn't want to meet these people, and they were not nice. They were probably just drugged out of their mind, and I was sitting there drooling in their face or whatever it is, right? So it was not really good. That happened a lot. And then you provided no debrief, no sort of context, and the social workers and stuff just thought that was good to let it happen, which was very, very annoying. But I think children seeing parents in psychiatric facilities, there needs to be some sort of more care shown for the kid, because it can be very damaging seeing their parent as they do not know.
And Joel, just on that note, I don't know what age you were, but would you have preferred not to have seen your mum at the hospital, or would you prefer that the setting would be different, like they would take you to a different place where you could talk to your mum as opposed to the psychiatric ward? Yeah,
it would have been good if she was in a park or something like that. I think that would have been better. Where we saw her, because she was in like the locked facility, it was just the room. That was just the closed room, and they'd close the door, and you were there with her. There'd be some toys on the ground, and then she'd start. She was still mannequin stuff, saying all these different things, and it wasn't supervised as well. So sometimes it was supervised, sometimes it wasn't. But it was very, very hard, because with her condition, she would say a lot of wrong information all the time, a lot of things, and we had no idea. We just believe it because it's her mum. So it was very hard growing up knowing what was right or what was wrong. That was very, very hard. But yeah, definitely a different setting would have helped. And not, having to go around the facility and walk through all the wards and all that sort of stuff, which was not a good experience.
When you went to visit your mum did you have an adult with you, like a cousin or an auntie or someone?
It depends. So sometimes it was the foster person, or sometimes it was the friend's family member who was staying at. There was never maybe a social worker or something every now and again, but they would just sort of leave us with her, and then they would go somewhere for half an hour or whatever it was. So yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And after visiting your mum, would the teachers at school know, or would they be aware of some of these things? No.
I don't really remember too much. Look, I think some people knew, but it wasn't, maybe in high school more they would come, because it was a small town, so people in a small town know more, whereas in a city people don't know as much. So I don't think the teachers definitely when we were younger didn't say much about it or give us any allowances. In high school, some of the teachers knew it, but they they might pull you outside every now and again and say, oh, your mum's in hospital or whatever, but that'd be really it. So and what was the other part? Sorry.
The other part, well, we talk about your mum, but then the second one, we talk about the family. And in terms of your mum being unwell, was there ever a place where, I suppose, your family, when she came out of hospital, how did they support the family when she came home? Was it just here?
I was more left on their own. Like, she come out of home, her mum's brothers and sisters, and her mum especially were really good to her, so they would look after her. But look, they would have different things in place. So they might have like a nurse coming around every morning to give her medication and make sure she took it, because adherence she wasn't good with. She would also had a caseworker, Jodie Wilson, who was right up there until the end. She was great for her. So she'd come around every couple of weeks or every week and check in with her. So that was at the start, but then the support got a lot better as she got older with the NDIS. So
yes, at
the start, it was generally maybe a caseworker once a week, and maybe the nurse from the ward or whatever coming to give her medication. This is in Warrnambool. Warrnambool, by surprisingly, was actually far better than Perth. Perth had no support from what I remember. When she came out after 3 or 4 months, whatever it was, I maybe can remember one social worker coming over once, maybe just see her, and that was it. There was no regular check-in. There was nothing in Perth. She was just left on her own. Whereas with Warrnambool was really good. They were way more supportive, being a small country town. As the NDIS come in place, that was really good for her. So she had all the community sort of care thing, like, nutrition, someone come and take her out from wellways, all these sorts of things. So that was really good for her.
That's a good point. So the NDIS was a significant shift in how to provide care.
Yeah, it was definitely way big improvement because she got a good, decent package, as she should have. So that was really good. So she had a lot of good services with that. And most of the services, they were there for the right reasons. I don't think they were there, trying to rip anyone off or anything. So she always had a lot of good support with the NDIS, which I thought was good.
Yeah. And in terms of like other professionals that you've seen, like there was a lot of support for your mum, and you're saying that there was a bit of a gap in support for yourself. At what point did you start to reach out for your own well-being, if I can ask that question? Are there times when you felt like as if I need to make sense of this and talk to someone?
Yeah, I tried to. I've done that probably when I was maybe 29 or 28. I've done it a couple of times, but I didn't really find it too useful. I was just talking at someone, and I wasn't getting much help. So I sort of gave up on that. So I've only done it probably twice. Growing up, we were sort of maybe offered counselling, or they tried to do counselling with us or something like that, and never worked. So we never had any debrief. We never had any regular counselling at all, to be honest. So we had none of that. So maybe I tried twice when I was 28, 29, but then I didn't. The people are all right. I think I went to one session and that was it. And then the other one I went for like 3 or 4, but the cost sort of put me off as well. So, I didn't want to have to go and pay all this money for something that I thought that I should have got when I was younger. So it's sort of that's sort of something a bit stubborn with that at the moment, but haven't really done too much from it. We didn't get much. I didn't think we got the appropriate support growing up with mum in regards to any sort of help in regards to counselling or to psychologists or whatever. They might have tried, but it would have been hard to reach us because we had a big distrust of people involved in the space just because they were the ones taking her away. Now we haven't had really overly much at all.
It's an interesting point because I think, the hard part is how much of it is giving your mum individual support and how much of it you need to give the people around the family members to give that support. There's been I don't know if you know this, but there's been a recent announcement that the federal government is going to give money to what they call a carer's peak body and a consumer's peak body now to be established around the mental health area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I think one of the things that we're hoping that will come out of this is the ability then to people who care for people with a complex or severe mental illness to shed light in about policy development, services, and give some insight. And both from a consumer point of view, but also, a carer's point of view and also a consumer's point of view. What do you hope that these sort of initiatives may develop in the future that might help?
Yeah, well, I think the families, the people, the family members, as you would know, you're living with the person with the condition, and obviously the focus is on the person with the condition. That's fine, but your life is affected directly by that person. So the treatments, all that sort of stuff, and then there's obviously what about yourself? And it's a complex situation. If someone's parents or something's a drug addict or something, it's sort of, I reckon it's almost easier to deal with in a way because you can probably get in there early and provide support and stuff, and it's easy to deal with. Whereas there's a complex mental illness, like that person might be present for 6 months, then away for 3 months, whatever it is. But I think anything like that is good. I think we tend to focus, obviously the focus has to be on the person with the condition, but governments need to realize that that person affects all these people around them. So if they've got a large family, they're affecting 30 to 40 people. And it's not just something that they do once a week or whatever, it's for the rest of the life. So it definitely affects the quality of life around of everyone. And we just want that person to get well and be happy as well. So I have seen the ads for carers and stuff like that, which is fantastic. I think they do a great job for the community. A lot go unpaid and a lot sacrifice a lot of their own life and life choices. Like there's a lot of kids and people who probably won't leave their town or leave the area where their mum or dad is because he's there. So they sort of sacrifice a bit of their life for them. That's why it took me a long way. That's why it took me for a while to move from Warrnambool to Melbourne, because I felt guilty. So I had a lot of guilt with mum. She would call me 10 times a day and I would answer, even though I'd be rude and hang up on her sometimes. I'd still answer just out of guilt all the time. So the person's life who's around that person is impacted all the time. So, other things in place we can do to help them because their life decisions could be altered by what they do with that person. And it's not just what you see when they're unwell. There's other things as well that goes on behind the scenes. With,
obviously you've come in kind of like a full circle because you've gone through this, your mum passed away, sadly. You now kind of reconnected with your father. How has this experience kind of made sense of your family situation at the moment?
Look, it's a very tragic situation with mum. Her condition she got, which was called progressive supranuclear palsy. I had no idea about this thing. There's not much awareness around it. It's sort of a form of Parkinson's or whatever. It came really bad. And look, the neurologist or neuroscientist, whoever he was, when I met him, said she got airlifted from Warrnambool from the nursing home to Melbourne for an appointment with a neurologist, neuroscientist. She couldn't go in because of COVID or whatever it was. So they kept her outside on a bed, and I had to go in and have an interview with meet the guy. He didn't even know her family history. So she's got long, complex history with stuff. He didn't even know about the history. So I told him the history. Then he told me the diagnosis, and he said, yeah, that makes sense. She's had ECT and all that sort of stuff over the years. The brain atrophy explains this condition, which was not a genetic thing either. It was very, very frustrating to hear that, because I know for a fact, based on how long her mum lived for and stuff like that, her life probably ended 15 years, 12 years, 13 years prematurely because of bipolar disorder, really. So that's been very, very hard. And look, you can't blame the people treating it, because that's the only way they knew how to treat it at the time. But I do wish I knew more about it at the time, or my father or someone knew more about the treatments at the time and was stronger with the people treating her. I don't think we were strong enough as a family, because we knew ECT. It was always ECT all the time, straight away, give her ECT, because that will set her up to bring her down as quick as we can. There was no attempt to play around with medications or keep her in there for longer than normal and try and get her down with other interventions. It was always ECT, ECT, ECT. And, she's had that over decades. So that cut her life short by 15, 13 years. But the other way I look at it is it could have prolonged her life, because she might have committed suicide or something, which I have been aware of from my dad, that she was a few times attempted that. So I've sort of got to look at the other way. Like, if she didn't have the ECT or the treatment that she did as aggressively, she could ended up committing suicide or whatever. Whereas but she's had it, it's also ended her life prematurely. So that's sort of hard to deal with. But what annoys me as well in that space, Bill, is that the fact that ECT is something that I don't think people really still know that's a treatment or that's used a lot. There has been a lot of brochures and stuff I've downloaded from Black Dog Institute and stuff about bipolar when I've done a bit of an audit to see about it. And they don't even have ECT listed as a treatment. So it's like, well, it is. And it's something that's not spoken about enough. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, actually. And it leads me to another question, because I guess what I'm understanding from what you just explained is, sounded to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the default treatment for your mum had to be or was ECG.
Yeah.
And maybe looking back in hindsight, I know hindsight's a wonderful thing, but there might have been more process of discovery as to what other treatments could also be helpful, as opposed to a default of just going back to ECG.
Yeah, and also a more holistic look at the life as well. So she had a lot of stresses as well. So she couldn't work every time she wanted to work. And I felt sorry for her, because she wanted to work and provide and stuff. But every time she worked and got stressed, she got sick. So she couldn't work. But she had no one to hold her in line with her and saying, stop, focus on these things. She needed someone to make sure she was eating right. She wasn't getting stressed with us kids, because she wasn't a big disciplinarian at all. So we sort of do our own thing. So she needed some help with parenting. So she got all this stuff later on. So when I was like 21, 22, she had really good support from like a caseworker and like making sure she'd go to the gym, or she's had a nutritionist, all this sort of stuff. Like, she's a professional athlete, but she had all these different things. And whereas before, if we had that at a far earlier stage, I think it would have helped a lot in regards to not having to go to ECT all the time. I think because they had limited beds and spaces and stuff, they just wanted someone in there as, and out as quick as possible. Long term, was it the right thing for them to do? Probably not. But that was just the reality of the time.
So I'm taking the take-home message from what you're just saying, that as a profession, we need to actually be much more mindful of the varied and diverse sort of approach to supporting someone with mental illness, with various different attempts in various different areas, rather than just focusing on one or two.
Yeah, I think from talking to a lot of people about this sort of stuff, I hear the same thing. From talking to people with bipolar disorder and other conditions, and they always say the same thing, exercise, making sure I'm getting up every day, all these basic things. So what support can you put in place to help with the basic things, so you don't have to go to all these hard things straight away? But yeah, it would have been good if because they knew had a fair big history on her. They all knew about her. So they could have had a bit more insights into it, instead of just going straight to, a lot of harsh drugs and the other treatment, knowing the person a bit more and being a bit more holistic in her support. Because when she got that more holistic support, when she got older, she was a lot less sick. And that's what was frustrating, because you sort of think, well, as her brain was deteriorating as she got older, she was a bit less sick than what she was when she was more healthier. So it was very frustrating to see that we learnt that probably a bit too late.
Was there anything in your experience looking at your mum that really helped her and really helped you?
In regards to
her illness, was there anything that you felt, I wish we could have kept doing this more of? That would have helped?
Yeah, I definitely think with her, look, she was very social, so daily contact with people, making her feel as though she was involved and she busy. She had to be busy all the time. So she had to be going out seeing friends or doing this and that. So she had to stay busy. If she didn't stay busy, she would just sleep all day and not do anything at home and eat bad. But for her, it was really important to have diet, have some sort of purpose. So whether it be doing some like TAFE course or something, like even though she couldn't use it, letting her believe that as well. And probably more listening with her. So the problem with my mum was that she always used to say things which I knew weren't true. And I used to just call her out on it all the time because I just got sick of it. But I realized that that wasn't the right thing to do. I'm not talking to her sometimes, I'm talking to the illness. And then with her, just from a support point of view, I found myself always getting really frustrated with her, but I've learned it a lot later. It was more just be mad. It's be mad at the illness, not the person. So, I'd find myself getting worked up by things she'd say, but then I started learning to separate that from her as a person. But yeah, no, it was very, very tough. And the best thing in the end was, look, she had palliative care and 4 weeks, like she's laying in a bed and she's couldn't move. And this PSP condition is very, very cruel and she deteriorated. But to be there for 4 weeks was the best thing I could pay her back for raising me. So that was the best moment of my life. It's also been the worst moment of my life because I've been able to, she supported me for all these years. She was a great mother. And in that last 4 weeks when she really needed me, when she was dying, like she was laying in bed, literally passed away, I was be able to be there for 10 to 12 hours a day with her and be there for her. So when she passed away, there's a lot of rich people who die with no one around them and no one who loves them. Mum didn't have much at all, but in the last 4 weeks, she had people there every day. She knew she was loved. She had a lot of great support. So in the end, even though it's a tragic sort of ending, with anyone who dies early from something that I thought was brought on by this treatment, she ended up having a good, successful life, in my opinion, because you can have all the possessions in the world, but when you're there to meet your maker at the end, no one wants to die alone, right? And who's there with you? You can have all the money in the world, but there's a lot of people who die alone and unhappy. So she was happy at the end. She had all her friends and family there. And that was the best thing I learned, was just having a lot of understanding, a lot of empathy for her and her condition. And I really had a lot of closure towards the end. And I don't blame her for anything at all. And no, she was a great mother and she tried her best. And a lot of times I used to go up and she used to go to me, I'm trying. I used to say to her, well, you're not trying enough. You need to do this.
Yes.
But now I realize that was a completely wrong thing to say. And she did try her best and she did a good job. And myself and my sister have a really good, have a good life and we're successful in our own things. So she did her job and a lot better than a lot of other people. So who had no excuses as she did. So that's sort of what I got out of it in the end.
So I don't have any further questions. And I think that's a great way to kind of end this sort of interview is just on that note, because I think when you interviewed me, I think one of the things that people sometimes miss is that there are those moments of you cherish. With my mum, I know that there was a couple of times where she was so full of life that was just so wonderful to be around her. And people sometimes don't associate mental illness with that kind of behavior.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the thing with bipolar, like when they're manic and up and about and stuff, it can be very fun and it could be a lot of different things. But you're right. And I used to look at with my upbringing with my mum way more negative than positive. Now it's completely flipped. I don't remember anything negative at all. It's all positive. And if someone tries to bring me back to negative stuff she did, I don't want to know about it. So I've completely flipped it. And it's it's been far better.
Yeah, and I'll share you something else too, which I thought was really important because you touched upon, is my relationship with my mum now is that I still see her probably twice a week, 3 times a week sometimes, and I talk to her almost every day. But what I find is exactly what you just mentioned, was she just loves to talk, and you don't necessarily listen to what she's talking about, but the fact that she is talking to you and you're connecting and you're not making judgment is almost therapeutic for her. And you kind of, as a son, you kind of feel like, yeah, that's my role. My role is not to judge what she's saying, is just to listen and allow her to kind of express her thoughts. And that's probably more important than actually judging what she's saying. So
that's right. Exactly right. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you because I think it's a good thing. Joel, I thank you so much for your time. I honestly don't think a lot of people have the kind of courage or the ability to actually be so frank and honest with the sort of things that you just spoke about. But in order to kind of allow people to have these difficult discussions, it's important for someone to kind of open up, divulge some personal things and give some insights. I think that's probably the most important thing about your podcasts that I take out of it, is the insights that need to be brought up to surface and understand how people make decisions around mental health care, that these things are very pertinent. It can sometimes get lost in the system itself, but the actual interaction day to day needs to be at the forefront of how we make some decisions or thoughts or even support care for the loved ones.
Appreciate it, Bill.
And likewise, I really do appreciate your talking to us. But I guess from my point of view, what I can say is your experience and particularly how you're now coming to the point where you're engaging again with your dad and you're resolving some of the things that you've gone through in your childhood, and you're putting a different lens and perspective on what you experienced as a child with now what you experience as an adult looking back as a child is really important. I can't tell you enough how many people I've seen in my office who have so many difficulties in taking that brave step to say, no, I really do need to meet this front and center and reconnect or open up the door to answer some of those questions rather than just leaving it. Because it's quite often a lot of people think it's just easier and just leave it. And having that step is really important because then it opens up other doors that alleviate some of the tensions and the emotions that you've been holding for so long. So that to me was really important to capture in this interview. And I really do appreciate the fact that you've been so open and honest about your situation.
I appreciate it, Bill. No, thanks for this initiative. This was your idea, so I really appreciate it. And it's weird being on the other end of answering questions. So no, I appreciate it, mate. Appreciate it. You're interested in it. And as I said, it's great to have your story when we had your talk. These are the stories I think your story especially is we need to say more. I think mental health awareness is still at a point where everyone's, it's sort of like the trendy thing to jump on it and, we're supporting this or we're supporting that and depression and whatever. And so there's a lot of meat and potato stories, like what we went through. These are, for me, are the real stories and the stuff that you need to hear more of. Not an athlete who misses 6 weeks through depression. And I'm not making light of that, but I'm just saying that the stuff that we know about and that you know about in your work that goes on, the general populace don't know about. And look, it's hopefully with governments, with carers and all these things that are happening now, and there's a lived experience thing they're doing as well. They're starting to slowly shift funding towards other areas, not just hotlines and the service level hotlines and marketing campaigns and things.
Yeah, I agree. Joel, you and I are on the exact same page to this. I do think we need to, I think I mentioned when we were doing our interview, I use an analogy of type 1 and type 2 kind of mental illness, same as what they do in diabetes. And I think there needs to have that discussion to start saying, okay, there are people with some significant mental illnesses, and it's hard to identify because it's not like you can do a test and identify someone's got a mental illness. It's over time, you start to realize their kind of emotional and behaviors start to accumulate over time to say that this person has some significant mental distress that is impacting on their day-to-day life. As opposed to, just like you're saying, it's not to dismiss that people might be going through a mental health experience like a condition, like, stressing over a certain job or stressing over, some family tensions or a breakup. Those still affect you emotionally, but they're not necessarily an emotional illness because that's a life transition stage that's difficult to go through, but people get through it. It's just a matter of supporting them to get through that. Whereas a mental illness is something that you manage throughout, or my mum, and I'm sure a lot of other people, you have to kind of manage the entire life with these ups and downs of the things. And it has a direct effect on the family around that person.
That's right. And it's not really a direct positive effect. It's going to be a direct negative effect, right? So holding all things equal, we don't know how different we would be, but that's the way governments have got to look at it, right? So this person's got bipolar and let's say 1% or 1.5, whatever the stat is, right?
Yes.
But that person might have 5 people directly around them. So these 5 people are always going to be, I'm not saying negatively affected by that person in a negative way, but their life is impacted in a different way. So it might be something where they might not move home to take up financial opportunities because they're worried about their mum or their father or whatever, or their dad might have enough and then leave, and then all of a sudden they're the ones involved. So it affects so much more than just that one person. And that's what they've got to realize. And economically, it makes more sense for governments to make sure that we want everyone as productive as possible in society. So what supports can we have in place for family units who support these people? Because if there's 6 or 5 people around this one person and they decide, look, life's too hard, mum's got mental illness, I'm not going to achieve anything and go and, your negative outcomes are more for people in these situations. So it just makes sense from a government's point of view to support, community care like what you do and all these other things that are coming out. Throw the funds behind that, because the more relief and the more burdens you can ease with the family side or with friends or whatever it is who's supporting this person, the more positive outcomes they're going to have in their own life, and they can go and achieve better things and not get dragged down to the victimhood mentality. Well, my mum or dad's got a mental illness, that means I can go out and do this and that and whatever it is. So I think it's important what you guys do, and hopefully they can start getting more more funding towards these community care organizations and the ones that look after the kids, like Satellite Foundation is one I always talk about, and these other organizations, because it's so much more important, because as we both know, we've turned out all right. You know, we've gone and done our own thing. And there are people who don't. They use it as a crutch, or they go into a victim mindset, and they have every right to. I'm not saying you can't not be a victim or not, but it's so easy to see why people, you know, let's say in the street you pass a bloke who's homeless, or, you know, who might be washing the windows with the bottle of water, and you think, you know, that guy's just a this or this and that. Like, you don't know what's happened to that bloke. He might have had a mum or a parent with you know, serious mental illnesses, and he left home at 14 on this. You don't know. So that's why it's really important for governments to fund not just these surface level and these hotlines and stuff, which are fine, but these real meat and potato organizations like yourself and that, who get in there and support the person, and in turn helps the family unit, and that leads to more positive outcomes, not only for the person but for the other people around him. So it's not just one person, it could be 6, 7, 10 that are directly impacted.
And I'll add to that, Joel, because I think you're completely right that it does affect that ripple effect with family. But sadly to say that there are also people with mental illness there who lose their connection with family, or the family just are not able to cope, or, you know, have quite a lot of resentment. And then not only is it difficult going through life with a mental illness, but then not having a connection or a support of family or friends or something like that is, I mean, that's part of the kind of work that we do, but it's incredibly, incredibly isolating and damaging and difficult for someone.
There's a film called Happy Sad Man. I don't know if you've seen it, by Genevieve Bailey.
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Really good watch. And that happened with one of the characters. The son was still involved with the father, but he was done some things at family events, and half of the family didn't speak to him or whatever. So, yeah, you're right. And then obviously ethnic communities as well. There's some, I've had a few guests on Asian background, and and they said in their culture, it's like an embarrassment or like a shame to the family. So you're 100% spot on.
Joel, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. If you need anything further from me, I'm happy to help out, because I think what you're doing is really good. I have to say, I'm really envy the fact that you're actually taking on the initiative and sharing some of these stories. And I've been looking at all your podcasts. A lot of them are quite diverse, so it's really good insight. So I even recommended people to come in. So if you need more people to come in, let me know. Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. Like I said to you before, there's quite a lot of people in the organisation and some other people I know who have experiences similar to what I have, who probably would like maybe have an avenue to talk about it. So I might point you in the right direction with them. Yeah.
Be fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, mate. Be awesome.
Leave it to it then. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bill. See you, mate.
Take care. Talk soon.
Thanks Bill. See ya.